we were saying that this particular young lady said that when she was interviewed, that they have been putting this chip in animals for over 20 years. So as it relates to whether or not it is safe, she is okay with that. Even in Jamaica land we love, there was a great conversation last year, even leading into this year, as it relates to the NIDS bill. There are persons who are saying it is a mark of the beast, and there are persons who are saying that it is a system geared towards introducing that particular situation. That again, I'll talk a little bit about as we go further in the study. So I'm just saying that there has been a lot of conversation, and COVID has done a number of things for us, in the sense that it has once more awakened the church and the people of the world to the possibility that the things that God has said in His Word concerning the end time is true. And one of the things that we know that is associated with the end time, and greatly associated with end time prophecy, is the idea of the mark of the beast. So that's our topic for tonight. But before, like usual, before we can even go into discussing the mark of the beast, beast itself, we have to consider the background of this entire book. So let me give you a brief understanding of what the book of Revelation is about. If you have ever read the book of Revelation before, as a young Christian, I was one of those who was a little bit concerned about some of the things that were there, because the thing is I did not understand some of the symbols. I did not understand what this meant. I saw Revelation as a book to be avoided because of the terrible things that are mentioned in there. It's a scary book for a number of persons. But once you get to start understanding and reading the book, then you realize that it is not so. The use of knowledge is power, somebody said, and some others say knowledge is power. But Revelation is one of those eschatological books that deals with the last days or the end of days, and gives us prophecies concerning the future, right? So if you're looking at the book of Revelation, then you'll understand that Revelation itself is the revealing, it deals with the revealing of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. That is the whole purpose and function of this book, that gives us an idea of what was past, what was, what is, and what is to come. So the book of Revelation was written by John the Apostle. Now, this is the John who would have walked with Jesus while he was here in his earthly ministry. He would have been banished to the Isle of Patmos during the time when the church was experiencing severe persecution. But John, unlike the other disciples who died who were martyred, John died a natural death. So it is he now who, while banished to the Isle of Patmos, that gets a revelation where God appeared to him, Jesus appears to him, and began to give him, reveal to him what will happen in the future. And so this really is a recording of the conversation that John the Apostle had with Jesus concerning the future of the world. And so he has written it to us so that we can have a better understanding of what it is all about. Now, according to historians, Revelation was written about between AD 1 and AD 96. That was towards the end of the reign of Emperor Domitian. It was he who would have been guilty of banning John to the Isle of Patmos. So it was written during that period of time. When you consider the nature of the book, the most prominent, unique feature of the book is the dramatic use of symbolism. Throughout the entire book, you'll see symbols representing various institutions, representing various persons, and a lot of persons stay away from Revelation because it is filled with symbols that they themselves do not understand. Right? So when you consider that, now there are many methods of interpretation when it comes down to the book of Revelation. Persons and theologians have used many ideas and various concepts in order to get a better understanding of what Revelation is all about. I am going to be using, and I do believe in what you call the futurist method of interpretation. And what this simply is is that this method uses the interpretive key of Revelation 1 verse 19 in placing most of the book to be fulfilled subsequent to the church age. So let me break that down a little bit for you. The futurist method really looks at it and says they're using Revelation chapter 1 verse 19 as a means by which they would interpret the entire book of Revelation. Because if you look and read Revelation chapter 1 verse 19, I'm going to read it for you, you'll realize that it gives a natural division of the entire book. From Revelation 1 to Revelation 22, it gives us a division of the entire book. And this is the division. Read Revelation 1 verse 19. It says, the angel, Jesus speaking to John the apostle, he said in verse 19, he said, write the things which thou hast seen. The things which thou hast seen. That's one division. Write the things which are. That's another division. And the things which shall be hereafter. That's a third division. When you look at this, I mean, from just reading it, you realize he said, write the things which thou hast seen, which means that John was told to write the things that he had seen, which means that was the past, right? He was not just to write the past, but he was also to write the things which are present things. And then he would write the things which shall be hereafter. So if you're dividing the book of Revelation, you'll divide it into three sections. The things which he has seen, which will take into consideration Revelation 1, from chapter 13, from Revelation 1, 13 to 18, verse 13 to 18, that will deal with basically the things which he has seen. What did John see? If we should read a little bit of it. Verse 13 says, and in the midst of the seventh, and I turned to see the voice that spake with me, verse 12, and being turned I saw 7 golden candlesticks, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. And it goes further down to give us a description of what John had seen. Right? Before he got the revelation, that's what he saw. A description of Jesus Christ. Then it says the things that which are. So from chapter 2 to chapter 3, the book deals with the things which are. Now, when you look at chapter 2 and chapter 3 of the Bible, of the book of Revelation, you realize that chapter 2 and chapter 3 deals with the churches, the 7 churches in Asia Minor. And for many theologians, this particular aspect of Revelation deals with what they consider to be the church period. So first, John is told to write the things which you have seen, right? Walking amidst the candlestick, one who looks like the Son of God, the things which are, which means that they would be existing at the same time that John was existing. So what you need to understand is that while John was on the Isle of Patmos, the church in Ephesus, the church in Pergamos, the church in Thyatira, the church in Sardis, in Smyrna, in Philadelphia, in Laodicea, all those churches were actually functioning churches who had bishops that presided over them during that particular time. So he was told to write the things which are, which means he was to write the present things. And within his documentation of what God wanted to tell him to tell the churches, he wrote that which was. Not just that which was, but that which is present. I hope you're still following me. So that's chapter 2 and chapter 3. When you go to chapter 4 now, from chapter 4 to chapter 22, you have the things which shall be hereafter. Now the churches in chapter 2 and chapter 3 represents the church period. So in other words, when the church period or the church age comes to an end, God said to John the apostle, I'm going to show you what will take place after the church age has come to an end. And we know that the church age, there's no time frame as it relates to the church age. In fact, we learned last week that Daniel, who had a vision of the history of the Jewish people, that he would have seen 70 weeks, according to Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 down. It talks about that 70 weeks are determined upon your people. And it talks about the fact that we had already gone through 69 weeks, but there's yet 1 week to be fulfilled, which we know is the tribulation period. 1 week is equivalent to 7 years. We talk about that. So really, according to Daniel's prophecy, we only have 7 more years to go. But the thing is, within that prophecy that Daniel got, God placed the church period that we know its beginning, but we do not know the end. We do know it started at Pentecost. We do know it will end with the rapture of the church, but we do not know when that rapture will be. So at the end of the church period in Revelation, if you're still following me, there's a transition. If I should read that for you, I know I'm spending some time on this. Chapter 4, verse 1 says, after this, after he had gotten the revelation concerning the things which are, we should have symbolized the church period. John was now told, he said, after this I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. So a lot of theologians believe that chapter 2 and chapter 3 put an end to the church period. So some believe that between the chapter 4 verse 1 is symbolic of the transition of the church, where John was told to come up higher and he will see things which shall be hereafter, which begins to give us an idea of the things that will come in the future. So many theologians believe that this come up higher is symbolic of the church being called, because it came directly after God had sent a message to the 7 churches. The next thing that came after that was John being told to come up hereafter and come higher, and he will see what will take place in the future. So a lot of persons believe that between this point, the church will be taken out of the world, and John will see now what will happen after the church is taken out of the world. And this is actually the pre-tribulation believers' idea of the church being taken out of the world before the world is plunged into the tribulation period. So what John is about to see now from chapter 4 on to chapter 22 is what will occur within the tribulation period. In fact, it goes to the tribulation period, and then it goes to... So in other words, the entire book of Revelation will take into consideration from chapter 4, the 7 years of tribulation, and then the 1,000 years of the millennial reign of Christ, and then the release of Lucifer, or the devil, or Satan, or the dragon, after the tribulation period, and then that final battle of Gog and Magog, where he at last will meet an end, or his life will come to an end as we know it. So the reality is that the entire book of Revelation has been charted out for us. The reality is that we really didn't know that it was so. And that's just the idea. We really didn't know that it was already outlined for us, a natural outline. Very, very natural outline. All right? So that is the natural outline of the book, right? Write the things which thou hast seen, write the things which are, and write the things which shall be hereafter. That's what John was told to write. When we come now to Revelation chapter 13, then we understand now that we are in, according to John's prophecy, we are in the tribulation period, because that would have started at chapter 4, right? We are in the tribulation period. We're in the final 7 years of the tribulation period, the 70th week of Daniel's prophecy, where God has poured out successive judgments within this period of time upon those who were upon the earth. So the judgment of God in this tribulation period will last for 7 long years. 7 long years. So it's within this judgment of God being poured out that we find this particular story about the mark of the beast. Now, when you look at the judgments, understand this, when you look at the judgments that God pours out successively upon the world who would have rejected his son, you realize that the judgments of God run concurrently, which means that they come one after the other. So, for example, the first thing that we saw was the breaking of the seal, the lamb who was found worthy to take the book and to loose the seals. So the first thing that we saw when it comes down to the judgment of God was the pulling of the seal. And we know that there was a white horse that came out when the first seal was broken. A white horse came out, and he who sat on it had a bow with no arrow. And of course, he was told to go and conquer. So his conquest of the world would be a bloodless one. He would, in a sense, conquer the entire world without even shedding one blood, or the blood of one person. Yes? That was the first thing. Now understand this. When you come to the 6th seal and the 7th seal expands into the first trumpet. So the judgment of God, as soon as the 6th seal is broken and that judgment is pronounced upon the world, then that expands and then finds its conclusion in the first trumpet, because the judgments of God run concurrently, one after the other, right? So the 6th the sixth, or the seventh rather, the seventh vial expands into the first trumpet. And then the seventh trumpet expands into the first bowl, or what we call vials. I hope you understand me. So in the back of your mind, keep this, that God is running judgments upon judgments upon judgments upon the people. From the first seal is broken to the last vial being poured out on the world, it is a series of successive judgments that God is pouring out on the world. Now understand this, while God is sending earthquakes and sending pestilence and releasing creatures from the deep, that there are other things that are taking place in the world. The only thing is that the most the concentration of the prophet it surrounds, in a sense, Israel within this time frame, because this is the time of Jacob's trouble. That's what the Bible tells us. It is a time where God pours out his wrath upon a disobedient world. The church will not be here, but the sons of Israel who have rejected Jesus will be here going through that period of time. There will be churchgoers here too. There will be persons who did not believe what the church had to say as it relates to the rapture. There are some who will be here who actually went to church but played church. There are some that will be here who had a form of godliness but denied the power thereof. The reality is, if you have watched many movies like Left Behind, you'd realize that some pastors are going to be here too. I know I won't be here. So the reality is, I'm saying this to say that this is a time that we take stock of our lives. We begin to sit down and look at our lives and realize that, look here, COVID-19 has shown to us that God, what Revelation has declared to us concerning the judgment of God, that it is possible. And it is possible. One virus. Now, can you imagine? One virus has created so much chaos around the world. Can you imagine successive judgments containing vials and seals and trumpets? In fact, the Bible tells you that at one point, when God was about to pour out the final judgment upon the world, that there was silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour. That the entire heaven became silent. And the question was asked, why is it that it was so silent? And then one angel says, the first woe is past, woe, and then he talks about the other woes that will come. In other words, the extent of God's judgment increase as he goes through the various judgments. So what you saw in the seal is further increase when the trumpets are blown. What you saw when the trumpets are blown are further increase when the bowls or the vials are poured out. Read it. Successive judgment. But within these judgments that God is pouring out upon the world, God gives us a glimpse into other activities that are taking place. We get a glimpse into heaven, and we see where the church is in heaven, seated at the Lord's Supper, having communion with Christ. We see that. We see a break where 144,000 was taken out of the world. So periodically, the lens of the camera turns from Israel and turns from the judgment of God and begin to, in a sense, look at other activities that are taking place during that time period. Hope you're still with me. So when it comes on to chapter 12, before we go to chapter 13, you'll realize that chapter 12 deals with the sun-clad woman, the great red dragon, the man-child, Michael, the archangel. It talks about the first beast, the second beast, and of course, the lamb. This is called, in a sense, the seven personages. In other words, these are seven individuals or seven things that took place during a period of time between successive judgments. If you read a particular chapter, if you read, for example, if you read chapter 11, from verse 15, it talks about the seventh trumpet. It talks about the seventh trumpet, right? That when the trumpet was, that there was earthquakes and so forth. And then you realize that there is no judgment being poured out in chapter 12. But when you go around to chapter 15, it talks about the preparation for the seven vials, which are the final judgments of God poured out on the world. So between the seventh trumpet and the first vial, there is something taking place. And the focus shifts to seven personages, are seven images that we need to take into consideration, because within the seven images that are shown here, we find the first beast and the second beast. And it is within this seven personages as we discuss them, that we get a better understanding of what the mark of the beast is all about. So within this, we find that there is a sun-clad woman, and all these are symbolic, right? All these are symbolic of nations, people, and so forth. The sun-clad woman is said to be, and I'm gonna give you that. The sun-clad woman is said to be national Israel, symbolic of national Israel. The sun-clad woman. Then the great red dragon, we know who he is Satan, is Lucifer. Then the man-child is considered to be the 144,000 Jewish male virgins who were taken out of the world during this particular period. We know Michael. Michael is the archangel. We know him. Then there is a Jewish remnant who are considered to be Jewish believers in Christ. Then we come to chapter 13 rather, and we see the first beast and the second beast. And this is where now the whole thing becomes interesting, because now we need to find out who these beasts represent. Because in order for us to understand what the mark of the beast is, we must first understand who the beast is. You can't understand a symbol that represents the beast without knowing who the beast is. So we're going to explore for tonight's study. And I don't know, maybe we'll finish it tonight, maybe not. But we're going to explore who this particular beast is. Yes? So there are a number of things that are taking place while the judgments of God are being poured out onto the world. There are a number of things that are taking place. So we understand now that there are seven personages, and this takes place now between the seventh trumpet, between the seventh trumpet and the first vial. There's a break from the judgment. In fact, not really a break. It's just, as I said before, that the seventh trumpet, the judgment that is poured out during the seventh trumpet expands into the first vial. And it's during the expansion of this that we find this particular situation that we're examining taking place. I hope you're with me. Just let me know if you're with me, and we will clarify that. So now, it brings us to chapter 13. And in chapter 13, we have a discussion concerning a beast. So let's examine the origin of the beast. Verse 1 of chapter 13, and I need you to read with me. Verse 13, chapter 1. And I stood, John speaking, upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. All right, let's not run too fast over these things. No, let's examine what John says. John said, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast. So the first thing that we know is that John saw a beast rise up out of the sea. So picture in your mind that John is on the sea, and he is looking out, and he sees a great beast coming out of the water. Now, within that, we know it is symbolic. The beast is symbolic, and the sea or the waters is also symbolic. It means that John is not really standing. He may be standing, yes, at the sea, but what he's saying to us is symbolic. So it requires some amount of interpretation. So the first thing that we need to ask ourselves is, what is the sea? Now, if you read the entire book of Revelation, for example, read Revelation 17 verse 15, and I'm going to read that for you. Revelation 17 verse 15. It says, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So let's, where we see sea, put nations, tongues, verse 17, put nations, tongues, and multitudes, peoples, multitude, nations, and tongues. So in other words, when we replace sea with people and nations and tongues, we're actually saying that a beast, right, and we're going to talk about who that beast is, comes out of nations or tongues or people. So in other words, we are saying that the beast he saw is symbolic of a person or an institution that comes out of the people. So we now know that the beast will come from among the people. It's not a creature like a normal beast that you would see. Beast is just symbolic of somebody who will come from among his people. So the reality is the beast is a person. Further down, we're going to learn that the beast can be an institution, but it can also be a person. We're going to discuss that. But this particular thing is saying that the beast is coming from among the people. So yes, the beast will come from among the people. But let's describe him a little bit more. It says, when he comes from the people, he has 7 heads and 10 horns. 7 heads and 10 horns. And we need to look at that. He has 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, if you read the book of Daniel, if you read the book of Daniel chapter 7, let's just look at that quite quickly. Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. Let me just run right to that point where we need to look at. All right, all right, let me read it. It says, in the year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream. And in the dream, Daniel saw a number of things. Verse 3 says, and he saw 4 beasts. He said that there was a great wind that strove up on the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea. See there again? 4 beasts came up from the sea. Now, again, we're saying that the beasts are symbolic of nations or people or person. And the sea is symbolic of people, nations. So in other words, you're saying an institution or a country or a world power came out from among the people or come out from among the nations. See there? Verse 4. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings. And you go down, he said the second beast was like a bear, tipped on one side, having 3 ribs in its mouth, between its teeth. And then he said, I looked and I saw a leopard. And upon the back of the leopard were 4 wings of a fowl. And the beast had also 4 heads. And then he said, I looked and I saw a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. He said, it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had, watch that, 10 horns. It had 10 horns. Now look across and you see from chapter 5, verse 15, the interpretation of the dream that Daniel had. And within the dream, look at verse 23. The interpretation, look at verse 23. It says, thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So what Daniel gives us as it relates to the beast is that what you need to understand is that the description we're getting of this beast in chapter 13 of Revelation is the same beast that Daniel got in Revelation chapter 7. Now, for those of you who are Bible readers, you realize that Daniel's dream really, and the interpretation thereof, was God giving Daniel an idea of when the world will be in the hands of Gentiles. The government of the world, or the governance of the world, will be in the hands of world powers who will be led by Gentiles, which are simple persons who are not Jews. So when you talk about the lion is just symbolic of Babylon, strength and power. The lion that Daniel saw in his vision is Babylon. The bear tipped on one side with the 3 ribs within its mouth is Medo-Persia, the Medo-Persian Empire, which the tipped on one side suggests that one nation was stronger than the other, because it's the Medes and the Persian. That's what they call it, Medo-Persia. It's the Medes and the Persians who came together to overthrow Babylon. If you have any idea of the metallic man that Nebuchadnezzar dreamt and the interpretation thereof, you can put the 4 beasts of Daniel's vision upon Daniel chapter 7. And you can also put this metallic man side by side and draw an arrow across it, and it will basically be symbolic of the same nations. So when it talks about the head of gold for Nebuchadnezzar's image, Nebuchadnezzar's metallic man, then it would be the lion. Both of them would be the same thing. They are represented Babylon. Absolute rule, absolute ruler, absolute power. And when it comes down to the torso and the arms of the metallic man, it is the same as the bear tipped on one side, which shows that one nation was stronger than the other. But though both of them came to join together in order to be great. Then we'll go further down to when you talk about the torso being bronze, and then the next animal you see, or the next beast you see, is a leopard with 4 wings. Then it talks about the Greek Empire, Greece, which was led by Alexander the Great. And the wings on the back of the leopard shows the swiftness by which Alexander captured the countries of the world, including the Medes and the Persians, who had captured Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar. So what God was giving Daniel was really a breakdown of the hands in which the world will be governed by, and how it will come down through the years. So when you put that now with the brass too of the metallic man represents the kingdom of Greece. Now the 4 heads that the leopard has with the wings suggest the swiftness. The 4 heads symbolizes that when Nebuchadnezzar died, he died of diarrhea. A great warrior, but died of diarrhea. When he died, his kingdom was divided among his 4 generals. That is why the beast had 4 heads. Because the kingdom of Greece was divided among his 4 generals when he died. So in other words, God was giving us an idea of how the world will be run from one world power to the next. So it was Babylon, then the Medes and the Persians overthrew the Babylonians, and then the Medes and the Persians were overthrown by Alexander and the Greek army. And then after this, Daniel said he saw a 4th beast that he could not describe. Theologians have called it the nondescript beast, which means that he could not be described. Because if you read Daniel chapter 7, Daniel does not really give us a great, just as how he said that there was a leopard and there was a bear and there was a lion, he does not really give us a great description of the beast. What he did tell us though is that it has great iron teeth. Now the metallic man of Nebuchadnezzar had iron legs. So this beast is the same as the iron leg, the nation that the iron legs of the metallic man represents, which we now know is Rome. Now, when you go further down the metallic man, you will see that the feet of the metallic man is part gold and part dirt rather, and part iron, or part clay and part iron, which means that there will be 10 toes, which will represent 10 kingdoms. So the 10 toes of the metallic man is the same as the 10 horns upon the head of the beast, according to Revelation 13 and Daniel chapter 7. So the toes represent the kingdom. The 10 horns represent 10 kings governing over 10 kingdoms. Now you realize in the metallic man of Nebuchadnezzar's dream that there was clay, and iron and clay really don't mix. So although they will come together for a particular purpose, they really can't get along with each other. The same thing with the 10 horns. You realize that after a while, 3 of the horns are broken out, and 1 horn comes up in the middle of where the 3 horns were broken out of. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I hope you're still with me. So what I'm trying to say to you is that the beast that Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7 is the same as the beast that we're looking at now in Revelation chapter 13, which represents the Roman Empire and the kingdoms that will be a part of it. Now understand that Babylon fell, the Medo-Persia Empire fell, the Greek army under Alexander the Great fell, the Romans fell as well. There's no more Caesar Augustus and no throne. They would have gone through their period of dominance. However, we realize that although the Roman Empire is not as strong as it used to be, the fact that the legs and the toes are iron, meaning that there will be what you'll call now the residue of the Roman Empire. They will not have the strength as if they had before, because the kingdom will not be, watch this. Let me show you, because it is a weakening of the kingdom throughout the years. When Nebuchadnezzar was king, he was absolute ruler, which means that everything he said goes. He was he alone who ruled Babylon. But when he was taken out of the way, the Medo-Persian emperor came in and it was divided among two kings. The Medes and the Persians, two nationalities or two nations coming together. It was divided from an absolute ruler to now have two individuals. When they were overthrown by Alexander, he died, and so the kingdom was divided among his four, which means that the kingdom of the Gentiles were further reduced from 1 to 2, from 2 to 4. When the Roman Empire came into existence, it was further divided because although Caesar Augustus was such a great man, he actually presided over what you call a council. So he did not have absolute power like how Nebuchadnezzar had it, because his kingdom was divided in the sense that anything that he had to do, he had to go. It's just like the system we have today. And that is why a lot of persons say that the system we have is a Roman or a Babylonian system kind of system. Because the thing is, we have a prime minister, but the prime minister has a cabinet. See? So the reality is that there are some things that he cannot do unless he goes to cabinet and it is passed by a majority vote. Same thing with Caesar Augustus. So the kingdom was divided until it comes down to the place now where there were 10 toes, just like the 10 horns, which represent 10 kingdoms, which had 10 kings presiding over them. Good. What else we learn about it? That the 10, that he had 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon the 10 horns, it had 10 crowns. So we know that they're kings, right? We know that they're kings. Further description of this particular beast. It says blasphemy was on his head, and but before we even run there, it says it has 7 heads. Now, when you read the idea that it has 7 heads, further down in the scripture, further down in Revelation, you will find that when it describes the whore, chapter 17, the whore sitting up on let me find that for you, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Where is it? All right. Look at chapter 17. It talks about verse 4. It talks about the woman who was arrayed in purple. Look, first of all, let me read verse 3. It says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy. Hold on. Didn't it say that this particular beast in Revelation 13 has upon its head the word blasphemy? So it means then that this beast rising from among the people, which is the sea, is not just an individual person, but is also a system. So what we need to understand is that the beast is a system presided over by one person. And that person is the Antichrist. So the Antichrist is actually the individual who governs the system. So he will be the one who actually governs the 10 kings. But then we realize if you understand Revelation chapter 17, then Revelation chapter 17 has to do with a particular. He says, so he carried me away in the spirit, and I saw a woman. And it talks about Mystery Babylon, a woman sitting up on a scarlet-colored beast. That's the system of the Antichrist, led by the Antichrist, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Same thing, same description as the beast we got in Revelation chapter 13. Same description. But who is the scarlet woman? Riding on. So in other words, the scarlet woman, which is symbolic, is in a great relationship with the Antichrist and the 10 kings. So the scarlet woman, dressed in fine purple, has a great relationship with the system of the beast and the Antichrist. They are together in this. And that is why when we look at Revelation chapter 13, we realize that Revelation chapter 13 deals with 2 things. It talks about the first beast and it talks about the second beast. The second beast will be, in a sense, a part of the kingdom over which the scarlet woman represents actually a particular city. Because if you read further, I think I'm running ahead of myself with this, but let's go anyway. Look, let's read it. Chapter 17. It says, so he carried me away in the spirit. We talked about that already. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abomination and filthiness of her fornication. It talks about the fact that she was Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots and abomination and so forth. Now, and it says, the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. So this scarlet woman is said to have killed a number of the saints. A number of persons were martyred as a result of her. Right? So verse 8 says, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. He says, and here is the mind which had wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Remember it says the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, or 10 crowns, right? The same 10 horns, 10 crowns, 7 heads. It says the woman sit over the beast, but also that she also the 7 head that she sits upon are 7 kings. Look at verse 10. 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And goes on, it says, the 10 horns that thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings, 1 hour with the beast. So the reality is that we are looking at, in a sense, we can almost say 17 kings. Could almost say that. Right? But then it talks about 7 heads that it sits upon. Interestingly enough, when we did our research where this is concerned, it is said that the Vatican City in Rome, I know I'm putting this out there, but it's alleged, so let me put that there too, that the Vatican City sits upon 7 hills or 7 mountains in Rome. You can do your research. It talks about that the woman was dressed in scarlet and purple. You can do your research as to who the cardinals, how they dress, what their attire is. And then you can go back and talk about who the second beast is. Because if I should run ahead of myself, you realize that the second beast is actually a false prophet. It's a spiritual leader who will actually assist the beast. So it will mean that there's be a spiritual leader who will have a great relationship with the Antichrist that will cause the mark of the beast to be instituted. It is not the Antichrist that will institute the beast, the mark of the beast. It is actually the false prophet. So it's actually going to be a spiritual person who will institute this mark, not the Antichrist. And we're saying, if the beast and the woman has such a close relationship, and there are 7 heads, and it is said that the Vatican City, so that's what they say, sits upon 7 hills, and that the description of the woman seems to be similar with the description of some of these individuals who are part of that. Then there are some out there who believe that out of that city will come forth the false prophet who will join with the Antichrist and wreak havoc upon this world. That's what they say. You be the judge of that. So let's get back. I don't think we're going to finish this tonight. Tell me when my time is up, because the reality is that, as I said before, if we're going to know what the mark of the beast is, we must know who the beast is. So we have a better understanding. We know that the beast is actually the Antichrist. Yes, we know that the beast is actually Antichrist, and he will be the one presiding over a particular kingdom of 10 kings. It says 3 of the kings will be rooted out, and he will come up. If you read Daniel chapter 7, it talks about the little horn coming up and speaking blasphemy and talking about a whole lot of things. Same thing. Read further down and we'll talk about it a little bit more. It says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet was as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. Hold on a minute. Now, remember we're talking about the beast that we're seeing here is the fourth beast of Daniel chapter 7 and the fourth kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar's dream as it regards to the metallic man. We know that the beast represents the kingdom of Rome. And it also, in a sense, represents the fact that the Antichrist is going to come within that framework of government, and he's going to be the ruler over those 10 kingdoms that will make up the latter part of the Roman system. But here we have a description of him. He says that he has, where is it? He said he was like a leopard, which we know that one of the beasts in Daniel 7 is a leopard, represented by the leopard which represents Alexander the Great. We also know that the beast that we are seeing here will have feet of a bear. We know that a bear is representative of the Medo-Persian Empire. We also see that this particular beast will have he will have feet like the leopard, feet as a feet of bear, and he will have the mouth of a lion. And we know that the lion was representative of the Babylonian kingdom under Nebuchadnezzar the Great. So what we're actually seeing is that the Roman Empire, when it is according to the description of this beast here, will be made up of aspects or part of the kingdoms of the Gentiles that had gone on before it. So there'll be a little bit of Babylon system in it. There'll be a little bit of the Medo-Persian Empire in it, and there'll be a little bit of the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great within this one government. So because it is the final kingdom that will reign before Jesus puts in his appearance, it comprises of aspects of the three kingdoms that had gone on before it. So it has a piece of Babylon, it has a piece of Medo-Persia, and it has a piece of the Greek Empire within it. But if you know the story of the metallic man, you'll realize that at the end, when the toes of clay and iron, when the metallic man reaches that particular place, that there was a stone cut out of the mountains without hand. You know that stone cut out of the mountain without hand is symbolic of Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ returned, and it says that the stone was cut out and it smote the feet, not the head, not the torso, right? Not the belly, not the thigh. It struck the toes of the feet of the beast and of the image, and the image fell. And the mountain grew, and the stone grew and became a great mountain. What God was actually saying to us is that when the kingdoms, these 10 kingdoms are established, ruled and governed by the Antichrist, that it is during this period of time that Jesus will return, symbolized by the rock cut without hands. And then the rock cut without hands will hit the metallic man, put an end to the times of the Gentiles, and then the stone will go into a mountain, which is the millennial kingdom of Christ, where Christ will now take rulership and reign over the world. That's why the stone became a great mountain. I know, exciting stuff, but we can't talk about all of it tonight. But let's see what else we can pull out of this before 9 o'clock, right? And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly. Let me go. Hold on before I go there. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. That's what we saw. Now, let me explain something to you as it really relates to that. So we know that the beast symbolizes the last great Gentile federated empire of Rome, symbolized by the legs of Nebuchadnezzar's metallic man with 10 toes, mixed clay and iron. Right? It also speaks to a political system governed by the Antichrist. We talked about that already. All right. So what you're going to find is that we know the 10. Let me go where we need to go. Where this is concerned. All right. So the confederated kingdom made up of the 10 kingdoms, the 10 toes or the 10 horns, will have all the characteristics of the past great Gentile empires, as we said before. Right? Like a leopard. That's what it says. It has it looks like a leopard, which means that it will be agile and alert and swift, like the intellectual Greeks led by Alexander the Great. His feet was as a bear, which means that it was ruthless like the Medo-Persian Empire. It will be ruthless like the Medo-Persian Empire. And it had a mouth speaking like a lion, which means that it will be majestic and exercising absolute power of Babylon. So this particular beast, which is symbolic of the Antichrist and the last confederated empire, the residual kingdom of Rome, will have characteristics of the three kingdoms that had gone on before them. Then what happens after that? It says, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Now we know that the dragon is the devil. So the power of the beast and his institution that he now supervised was given to him by Lucifer himself. It is Lucifer who has this particular beast and a string like a puppet. It is he who will be the one working through the Antichrist. And we know Antichrist against Christ, but it also means instead of Christ. So in other words, Satan would want to set up this Antichrist instead of Christ. He wants persons to worship the Antichrist instead of worshiping Christ, because they're trying to get somebody to replace Christ. That's why it says anti, against, or in the place of, right? Or in the place of. So he will get his power from the beast. The beast will give, rather the dragon will give this beast its power, to the extent that one of the heads would be wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. So the beast will have power to the extent that there will be something that will happen to one of the head, maybe one of the leaders that are a part of his thing, and then he will, in a sense, cause. So if we talk about one of the head, and we know the head represents one of the kings, is wounded, then we are saying that probably one of the kingdoms will suffer some amount of loss, and he will have the power. I would break away for a little while, but he will have the power to bring that particular head that was wounded back into the fold. I don't know. Some people may think that that has to do with the whole European Union. And we learned this year that the British people came out of that particular system. So we don't know. Maybe it is speaking to that. I don't know. I really don't know. What we do know, though, is that whatever the Antichrist will do during this particular situation, it will cause people to wander after him. And not only that, because of the power he got, the people will worship the dragon which gave him the power. And they will also worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Talk about Antichrist. Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So now the beast and the dragon, the devil and the Antichrist, is getting the admiration and the worship of the people because of a particular miracle that they did. And he was given a great mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 40 and 2 months. So he was speaking blasphemies. And when you talk about blasphemy, Jesus was crucified and the charge against him was blasphemy. Right? When you look at St. John chapter 10, around chapter 33, it talks about that the Jesus was accused of making himself. When they say, what accusation that you have against him? He said, he makes himself. He said he is the Son of God, which means that he was saying he is deity. He is God. That's why they crucified Jesus. They accuse him of saying he is God. So Jesus actually died for the truth, for we know Jesus is God. Right? So when it talks about blasphemy, it is where the Antichrist will speak things to the population and to the world as if he is Christ. Now, if you know anything about the Antichrist, I do believe that he will come into power when the church is taken out of the world. Don't ask me if he's alive. No, I do not know. Don't ask me when he is coming into power. I do not know. What I do know is that his prominence, his rise to power will come when the church is taken out of the world. The system are being put in place for the Antichrist to take control. We know that the systems are already in place. In fact, Paul tells us that the spirit of the Antichrist is already in the world. So we know that there's a system that he will work with that will give him great authority and great power to do the things that he wants to do. Because the Bible says in the first book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 6, that when there's a transition, that when the seal is broken, that out of the first seal, which is a white horse, symbolizes the Antichrist. Out of that seal came forth a white horse with a man on it who had a bow with no arrow, which is symbolic of the Antichrist riding on a white horse, because we know that in Revelation 19, Jesus comes on a white horse, and the Jewish people are actually looking for the Messiah to ride in regal attire, sitting upon a white horse, speaking peace. So the Antichrist will basically want to set himself up as if he is Christ and will declare himself to be God. That's the blasphemy that he will speak. He will declare himself to be God. Remember in Matthew 24, Jesus said unto the disciples, look here, there will many come saying that I am the Christ. Right? Remember, we read that it talks about that many will come and some people will be deceived. Same thing. Same thing. Many will be deceived. But watch this. His deception and his blasphemy will continue for 42 months. Now calculate 42 months. We have 12 months in a year. 12 months in a year. 12 into 42. We have what? 3.5. 3.5 years is almost in fact, 3.5 years is 3.5 years. 3.5 years. So hold on. What are we saying here? It says he will speak blasphemy, right? He will speak great things and blasphemy, and power was given unto him to continue or to exercise his authority 42 months, which is 3.5 years. So the Antichrist will be given the authority to exercise power for 3.5 years, which seems to suggest that this is the latter part of the tribulation period. Because when you remember the study we did earlier, it talks about that it is in the middle of the 1 week, which is 7 years, that he showed his ugly head. And the Jews saw him for who he really was and turned from him. And as a result of them turning from him, he will now begin to persecute them and persecute the saints of the world. Because the Bible said the dragon will pursue the woman who is national Israel. And when he finds out that the woman cannot be caught, he will now turn to the remnant, who is the Jewish believers who came to know Jesus as Lord and Savior. The reality, though, is that the church won't be here, because the tribulation period is not for the church. None of these things that we're reading is for the church. I was talking to a young lady at school once, and she was telling me that she don't go to Sunday church because Sunday church, she was told by her pastor, is the mark of the beast. And I said to her, well, that's very interesting, because if Sunday church is a mark of the beast, then it means that a number of things would have taken place before the mark of the beast comes into the world. The Antichrist would have already been here. There will be some judgments and some torments and some stuff, because when you look at where the mark of the beast falls within the outline of Revelation, you realize that it comes after there are the seals are broken and the trumpets are blown, which means that half of the moon would have been turned into blood already, which means that a number of things would have already taken place. I would definitely not be here, and that's a sure thing. So the reality is that there are persons who do believe that Sunday worship is the mark of the beast, and that's their belief where that is concerned. But what we do know is that the Antichrist will be given power to reign for 3.5 years, and I want to believe that this is where no, because for the first 3.5 years he will have shown himself to be a peacemaker. He is going to help the people of Israel rebuild their temple. He's going to help them rebuild their temple, and they're going to have a great relationship with him. And we're going to show you why a number of religious people will even look at him in a certain way, because there will be a false prophet by his side telling the people, look here, man, this is a real deal. There are over 2.5 billion Christians in the world. The majority of those Christians are Roman Catholics. I'm not saying this is the case, but let's just put it out there for a little while and let's discuss it. If the false prophet is the Pope, I'm not saying he is, but let's use some of the arguments that are out there. If he is the Pope, right, then he has the authority to command the majority of the Christian population who are Roman Catholics to serve an Antichrist. And that is why many of the Protestant churches, I marvel when I see many of our Protestant churches who are not Roman Catholic churches resorting back to some of the ideas and the ideals of a Roman Catholic system. I do believe that God has his people in every church. You know, once you believe what the Bible says and you believe in Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior of your life, and you accepted him, I do believe that there are persons in every church that will be in denomination that will be going to heaven. It's not a denomination thing, but the reality is that I find that there are some persons who are resorting back to that and setting up themselves as if they are God. That is why we broke away from that in the first place. And I see some persons doing some stuff and I'm wondering to myself, why is that we are going back there? But as some denomination calls us that we are the offspring of the beast. I am not the offspring of the beast, but some persons say that because of how, as Protestants, we are going. Read the story about Martin Luther, the great reformer, and you'll realize what we came away from and what I see many of our leaders are running to. If the false prophet is a spiritual leader, if the 7 hills consist that the Bible talks about is the Vatican City, if the Pope is considered to be the false prophet by some people, if that is the case, then there are a number of persons who will bow down to this beast and who will take his mark. And the reality is, unless we know who we are and what we're about, because it says in verse 7, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindred, tongues, and nations. Power was given to the Antichrist for the latter part of the tribulation period, the 3.5 years. I told you last week that this is the same time when you go further up, we talk about the abomination of desolation. When that occurs, then he will pursue the Jews. And when he can't get to the Jews, he will turn to the Jewish Christians across the world who would have come to accept Jesus during the tribulation period. They are the ones he will persecute. But we look at it. It says, verse 8, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. He says, if any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. As I said before, we must bring our study to a close tonight. When we get back next week, we'll talk about the mark of the beast. As I said before, it's very important that we know who the beast is before we consider what his mark is all about. We know who the beast is. He's the Antichrist. We know what his kingdom is about. He will set up his kingdom and he will reign over that. And he will seek to make himself to be God. The church will not be here, but there will be many persons who will be here, who will be deceived. Next week, we'll talk about the end result of those who take the mark and what the mark will allow you to be. Is the mark of the beast in the world today? No. Is there a system being put in place for the mark of the beast? Yes. The reality is, the Antichrist will use that system. There will be a mark. And at the end of the day, those who are here will have to decide what they will do when that occurs. Thank you for joining us. We'll have to stop here for tonight. I'll conclude next week, same time, same place. Join us for time in the Word as we explore what God is saying to us in these times. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for the opportunity that we have, that we can share your word, that we can discuss things concerning your kingdom and your kingdom to come. We ask now, Lord, for every person watching, for every person tuned in from across the world. I pray, Lord, that they will even now draw closer to you, that they'll realize, Lord, that everything that is happening around us was already prophesied and declared by you. And as we watch these things unfold, we recognize that that which you have said concerning the world and your people is true. So we ask that you'll keep us, God. Many have strayed from the faith. Many are weak in the faith. I pray even now that there'll be an appetite for your word, and that, God, there'll be persons who will seek to know you on a deeper level. Reveal yourself to us and give us greater understanding of where we are in the history of time. Lord, at the end of these studies, may we know more about you, and may we even have a better relationship with you. Bless our listeners. Those who are sick, we pray you'll heal them. Those who are discouraged, we pray you'll encourage them. Those who are down, you lift them up. Cause now your face to shine on them and give them peace. In Jesus' name. Amen. I'll take 2 questions if there are any questions. We'll run through that quickly, and then we'll bring tonight's study to a close. Any question as it relates to what we talk about tonight? I'm trying to make sure I go a little bit slower. I know there are times that I go really fast based upon the information that is there. But I want to make sure I'd rather go slow. There's one question. All right, let's hear the question.
All right, so we have one question from Jose Walker.
All right, Sister, one of my favorite Bible student. All right, go ahead. What's the question?
Yes, so she's saying, what are some of the practices that the church is going back to?
What are some of the practices that the church is going back to? All right, there is I see among especially the leadership of the churches. If you know anything about church history, the majority of things that we have in our churches today comes to us out of a Roman Catholic system. Though we say we are Protestants, and though we say we have, in a sense, cut ourselves off from that, many of the practice that we have today come out of that. Christmas came out of all of that. Easter came out of that. When you consider the ways in which some Protestant leaders are dressing today, with the whole garb and the whole thing. Not talking about the clergy and so forth, but the whole garb and so forth. I mean, that comes out of it. We have now a tendency, people are going back saying that they're bishops, and I do believe in the office of a bishop, but then the person's talking about their archbishops, and then they're talking about that they're bishop emeritus. All those are Catholic terminologies coming down through the centuries. So there are a number of little things that we do and we practice. For example, I do believe, like Easter came out of that whole thing. No, I really don't celebrate Easter, I tend to look at the fact that Resurrection Sunday was the time that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. It just happened to be celebrated within a pagan festivity, the idea of confessing your sins, where watch this, when a pastor or a leader sets up himself as if he is the absolute source of the revelation of God, and that all that is to be known comes directly through him, then that's going back to the system. Because the reality is, in the days of the popes, even though they believe that when the Pope prays over the bread and the wine, it becomes the actual body and blood of Jesus Christ, called the transubstantiation, where they actually turn into that. And that, in other words, you can't have that unless the Pope or the priest prays over it. But the reality is that each believer can partake of the broken body and the shed blood of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in their homes. They don't need a pastor for that. So when you set up yourself as if you're the absolute truth and that everything that is to be known comes through you, then you're resorting back to a system, because that's what the system was all about. The Pope controlled the people by controlling the information that the people get. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Sister. Wow. Any more?
No
more. All right. Thank you for joining us. See you next time. Thanks again to the media team for making this possible. See you next week, same time, same place, for Time in the Word. God bless.